Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. Today, Dead Duck and I are joined by the tall lady, and we're going to continue our discussion on the hero. This time, Dead Duck is going to bring us into the trope of the woman hero. Please pull up a stump and join us. And take it away, Dead Duck.
Thank you very much, Lee. Yeah, obviously the female hero has been a big thing in Hollywood of late. You know, actors and what have you complain that there's not enough female heroes, or the ones that are there are disliked. Part of the problem with these characters is they're very, very poorly written. It seems to be literally the only superpower that they require these characters to have is to be a woman. It's what happened with She-Hulk. You know, it was basically I put up with an awful lot more than the Hulk, and I'm better because I don't get angry about it and all this nonsense. But unfortunately, heroes have to be more complicated characters than that if they're going to work. And I really think that if Hollywood actually wrote female heroic characters with some depth to them and a backstory that wasn't cringy, people would be more willing to accept them. I mean, Ellen Ripley got taken to everyone's hearts because she was just, this sort of ass kicking machine who found herself in a situation she didn't want to be in, but decided to deal with it anyway. And it made her a far stronger character. You've also got the character from the Terminator films, who was, again, forced into a situation she didn't want to be in, but was heroic in her actions and a strong female character. There are others I can think of. And, Holly McClane from the Die Hard franchise. She was a strong female character. She wasn't necessarily the lead character, but she was certainly a pivotal character in those films. And her actions, while not necessarily as overtly heroic as those of the John McClane character, were certainly no less important, particularly in the first installment of the franchise. I don't know what you guys have to say.
Well,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I, I'm gonna be honest, this is a topic where it becomes a situation I don't even know where to start as a superhero fanatic and a formal Marvel and like Star Wars fanatic. Sort of still am, but like not for the newer stuff coming out. It's the never-ending issue of when they create these heroes, the only thing they're really thinking about, at least what it seems like, is about how to make, and this again, is just my opinion, but how to make like a mascot of the feminist movement. Of course, we've spoken about how so much more of toxic feminism is starting to take over. And so we're seeing all these characters, and the only thing they're about is badassery. Excuse my French, but that's the term I will be using quite often. The badassery, the kicking, the knowing how to fight, but there's no backstory, there's no character building. The greatest example I can think of is people were pointing out recently how Marvel has been struggling a lot with their movies. They went from coming out with one or two really big movies a year that made 22 billion or like 8 billion or whatever, a really large amount. And now they're coming out with a bunch of little ones, but they're making nowhere close to what they would when they did two big movies. And, there are those few people who are actually misandrous and, don't actually want female characters and use as a point to point out, oh, when Marvel had more male characters, they were more popular and they were making more money. And it is true that when Spider-Man came about, the Spider-Man No Way Home and the latest Spider-Man movies, they brought back the cash that Marvel had lost from starting all these little series. But the reality of the situation is what really lost is they've got all this wokeness, if you will, that they're putting in, but they're not giving the characters a story outside of their identity. Spider-Man, we see him have to give up his identity to his friends. They don't remember who he is anymore. He makes the great sacrifice. He has this aunt. We see the story development of him and his friends and romance and learning how to make relationships, how to communicate. We see him learn all of that throughout the timeline of Spider-Man. You don't see that with these female characters. Sometimes I'll make you see them go from maybe a more hard ass to a softer person. You see them go from a shy person to more confident, but the more focus that they have in the films are on being this very physical, very predominant, very dominating person. And that sort of barely changes. And they don't really show them having a relationship that builds. And so female heroes, we're glad to see representation in minority cultures, but what's the point of our representation if you aren't doing it correctly, if you aren't doing it in a way where maybe other things that we want, and doing it in a way where we also see that they're learning the same lessons we are. Because right now, they look nothing like us. No average woman can do what Black Widow does. Suddenly be a spy that can kick 10 SWAT or super buff guys' butts. And that's really the issue with the female hero. It's an unrealistic expectation. There is no humanizing part to that. And so women then are looking at these role models that are unrealistic and trying to reach it, and that leads them becoming toxic because they think everything's pulling them back from it. So that is sort of the storyline they give some of these female heroes too, is that everyone's pulling them back from it. It's just everyone else. And that's not the case. But just stop right there for now. And explain
later. Rant over. Whenever I think of fictional superhero characters who are women that are given, they're being given by the writers the opportunity to really become a hero, right? With a backstory and with a development and all of it. I think of like Gal Gadot's character as Wonder Woman. And it's like she managed to focus her aggression and her all of that stuff like on the bad guys. And if we're gonna be like simple and reductive and everything, that's kind of what defines a hero, is the attack on or defense against, or protecting the innocent and not superpowered from something bad, right? But then I think of somebody or a character like Captain Marvel, those movies where she's playing a part in them, those parts are dreadful, right? And the entire Captain Marvel movie is the same. I mean, it's just, this is not somebody I'm willing to generate sympathy for and get behind. I mean, even Iron Man, even Tony Stark. I mean, let's be honest about it. Tony Stark is not a lovable, cuddly character. He really isn't. But all that being said, when push came to shove, what he went after and what he threw all of his, genius and everything at was something that was bad, right? Something that was not even necessarily going to hurt him, but it was going to be hurting people. And with Captain Marvel, that was kind of an afterthought, and even with Wonder Woman, part of the backstory on that was that she she had to be corrected and punished because she was thinking of herself first in the little clip where, as a little girl, she kind of cheated on the warrior test, which she kind of did. But then I think like Peter Parker would never have become Spider-Man if he had not failed his family. And so, like I said, I'm not being intolerant as far as backstory goes and human frailties and failings goes, because that's the idea of a hero, is that they have those things, right? And they do the right thing anyway with special abilities and extraordinary circumstances and
Mm.
powers that other people don't have, right? And the point is, as a hero, you end up like that, right?
Mm.
And with even with Black Widow, her backstory is really harrowing. I mean, she was dehumanized and sterilized and turned into an assassin, literally, and had to, dig her own way out of that, right? And like I said, if they hadn't made, again, this is the case especially for Black Widow, if they hadn't made that something, that she was still disabled by, right? That she was still dehumanized by, then, she could just go through the world saying, all I am now is a hero. This is my job, this is my deal, and this is what I do, But with her, it was, I am a hero, but I'm also a monster. I'm also, you know, uh, doing this now to make up for, such an ugly past that was out of my control anyway, and it's like, I mean, in the broadest possible terms, you could say this is a hero, just, you know, not a very likable one, right?
Mm.
And it would be a bunch of stuff that wasn't even necessarily her fault, but uh, if they had focused more, on her willingness and ability to overcome those things and not so much on the fact that they still cause pain, then I would say, yeah, okay, that qualifies, because, the again, Spider-Man, is a perfect example. What happened as a result of his inaction, it would be very difficult for anybody to just get over it, right? But the point is, he does, and he doesn't drag it into his current day life all the time. And so, like I said, that's, in fairness to the idea of a female hero or superhero, there's a right way and a wrong way to present it, just like there's a right way and a wrong way to present a male hero or superhero. I mean, I bet you we could all come up with a list of male superheroes that we didn't care about at all, and, wouldn't spend the money to go watch in the theater because they did it wrong. They told the wrong story, right? Even about the right hero. Like I said, that, and I know you guys aren't really like this, but this is one of the things that I have a beef with about, you know, trying to be inspired by fiction at all. This one thing that bugs me about it, I mean, the only thing I've ever been is a guy, but even if I was a woman, my complaint would be, I'm handing a lot of ability to be inspired over to a bunch of people that, frankly, I've never met. They don't care about me, and many of them, their personal life is reprehensible anyway. If they live and work in Hollywood, chances are good, they're not really my kind of people. And so it would be very difficult for them to create a story where I'm going to be inspired and say, wow, I'd like to be that. And like I say, I talk to a lot of women about stuff like this. It's like, the common thread is that, we're being asked to be inspired, and to be, given at kind of an escapism type thrill at the hands of a bunch of people that I mean, these are the kind of people that also created the animated series Scooby-Doo here in the last, I don't know, 6 or 8 months or whatever. I haven't seen it, but everything I've seen about it tells me that, the Velma character created by Mindy Kaling is just terrible, and she's supposed to be the main character and kind of the hero, and it's like, it really just looks like you guys are, you're creating a series for people to watch because they hate it, and actually their season 2 is coming out soon, and apparently that's why. It's like, I don't, I don't want to be inspired by hatred and ill will, and the same holds true for, like I say, these blockbuster type heroes, like say Captain Marvel. I kind of pick on because it was just so bad. But also, there's others. I don't know if you guys remember Elektra. Was the counterpart to Daredevil, and was supposed to be his love interest, and he was supposed to be her love interest.
Yeah.
And she was a superhero too. And it was one of those things. There's really nothing exactly wrong with her. But again, I blame the writers because they didn't give her a lot of humanity. And it's like there was plenty of room for them to do that.
She didn't even seem like a hero in the TV series when watching in the series when watching it. She didn't even seem like it. She seemed like a psychotic superhuman villain.
Kind of, yeah. And there was plenty of room to, like I say, to make her look good, and they just didn't do it. They just didn't bother. She was just sort of this, as you say, morally dubious person with, special abilities and everything that might do the right thing and might not. It's like, well, what's so great about that? I mean, maybe I'm being immature here, but I want to see at least, like a positive trend. Going back to Iron Man, he did a lot of stuff in those films that again was, dubious, but he was trying, and you could tell that when it didn't work out, like with Age of Ultron, you could tell he knew he screwed up, and that, it was his fault, and he tried to do the right thing and it didn't work out, but with these others, even Black Widow, when she's doing the right thing, she makes it clear that she's doing it because she's done so many bad things, and there's nothing wrong with that, but for the other things, and it's like, I don't know if you're doing the right thing or not.
Yeah.
It's not clear. And you guys know how I feel about the trope of the hero regardless, that it sometimes is it's questionable inspiration anyway. But even within that, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And if you like Black Panther, he was presented as like just an ordinary man, but it was like really instilled in him from early boyhood that doing the right thing and protecting the weak and the innocent from the strong and corrupt, it was just, this is what you're going to be doing, and you need to be doing it, and if for any reason you fail at it, you will pay. And it's like, you have the other heroes, regardless of their gender or any other of their circumstances, if you want it to inspire, then like I said, you have to present that character that way. And so anyway, that's my take on it. Dead Duck, what do you think?
I think, as you pointed out with Iron Man, part of what made Iron Man a hero, in inverted commas, was the fact that he'd been humbled. He was an arrogant playboy. He was a fool, both with his money and with his affections and everything else. It took him being humbled, or almost dying at the hands of the very weapons he created, for him to understand his true place in the world. I actually think one of the best written female characters of the last God knows how many years was the young girl in Ghostbusters Afterlife. She's a fantastically written character. It did help, mind you, that the young lady who was playing the character was a fantastically talented actress. Absolutely wonderful. And she actually recorded a song for that particular film because it all around COVID and what have you. So, things like that certainly help. But I don't know why the writers don't look to real life for inspiration for strong women or women doing things out of the ordinary. I mean, I could say the name Joy Lofthouse to you. Nobody listening to this would know who she was. And she was in the Air Transport Auxiliary in 1940s Britain during the Second World War as a ferry pilot. Talk about somebody who's going against the grain and what have you. I can't imagine the amount of nonsense she put up with in her career, but I saw interviews with her much later on in her life, shortly before her passing, and she had this wonderful glint in her eye, which made you think this was a woman that would have been worth spending time with and being around, because she would have been an absolute riot. She would probably have had you in fits of giggles, and she would have been inspiring to be around. So, if Hollywood are going to write these female hero characters, look to real people. Give these female characters a bit of humanity. Have them be humbled so that they learn a lesson. Or they have to learn a lesson, whether it be something as small as cheating on a test or doing something which potentially could put many, many more people in danger, whether that's deliberate or otherwise. But I think that's part of the reason that so many people dunk on these characters, is they've just got nothing to them.
Yeah.
The whole superpower is I'm a woman. Right, okay, great. And what, do you want a medal? It doesn't, we don't hear these male characters going, well, I'm a man, therefore I am everything great and good and wonderful.
As I said, I think that's where the problem is the modern day sort of feminist movement comes in. Everything's become, well, I'm a woman, so I deserve this and that, and I'm oppressed in this way and that way. I mean, think about it. We hear male issues brought up usually to the government. It's only because there's something negative towards women about it. Everything's about I'm a woman now.
Right.
And so the characters are just reflecting the current culture for the most part. That's a really big
Right.
problem. I mean, they've been coming out with biopics that look great about famous females in history. And I love watching biopics, but I can't stand watching them anymore because they've took the story and they're still doing it, but they're cutting out so many parts so that they can still make it a I'm a woman story, but with just enough truth to be considered biopic, a historical biopic.
Yeah, right. And as Dead Duck was saying, there's no end, to the examples of real life stories and real life people, that you could tell those stories about, right? That you could base a superhero on, right? And as I think of, they don't make superhero movies around, men that are just bad actors, right? And not not sympathetic, not relatable, because what it's like, they would end up with a male character who is out there saying I'm a superhero because I'm a man. No one would waste their time with that. And what's happening now is people are finding that the same is true for women who are portrayed as superheroes. It's a waste of time either way. And people are beginning to resent it and to say, if you keep producing this kind of fare for us to come and see, we're gonna not come and see it. It's like that's fairly straightforward. But like I said, there's tons of real life examples of the lives of men, right, that are completely transferable to a story about a hero, right? And correspondingly, there's just as big of a list of women, and even girls who in real life, they had been heroic, and the ones that are still with us are still being heroic, and so, if you want to base a superhero character on somebody, why not do that? Their lives aren't going to be perfect, so your character doesn't have to be perfect. And to get where they, became who they are, they had to go through a lot of bumps and bruises and everything. So you can do that with your character. Just do that. It's not that complicated. Before we started recording, Dead Duck and I were talking about, the kinds of people, that we think well of and that we believe are doing the right thing, some of whom are doing it heroically, right? And I was saying, this is just one more thing that tells me, that humanity is divided exactly in half, right? There is the half that ends up that way, even if they don't start out that way. And then there's the half that doesn't, there's the half that just can't let go of, their insecurities and their selfishness and, their own self-interest at any and all expense. And, like I said, the circumstances of their birth never matters, right? It does not matter which piece of real estate they were born on. It does not matter what kind of equipment they were born with. It doesn't matter what kind of, background that they have, whether it's privileged, impoverished, whatever have you. Again, it has always been and will always be exactly two kinds of people, and no others, right? There are, well, maybe not no others, but there are very few people that are, in that gray area between. Maybe the closest you could come to it is people that are, just apathetic and don't care. They're not doing anything bad, but they're not doing very much else either. Everybody else, pretty much given the opportunity, is either going to do the right thing or take care of themselves. And, like I said, their appearance, their background, their gender, their ethnicity, none of that means a damn thing. It's just, there's this kind and this kind, and that's it. But anyway, I'm sorry. What were you going to say, Dead Duck?
I've just posted a couple of links there. If you guys want to click on them at some point. Yeah, it all comes down to the writing at the end of the day with these characters. I mean, I'm old enough to have seen Aliens, an Alien, and what have you. So, the Ellen Ripley character, the Holly McClane character, as I said in Die Hard. You had I can't remember her first name, but Murtaugh's wife in the Lethal Weapon series. She was a pivotal character to that series. I think of TV series like Bones with Emily Deschanel, and they started off, I would say, quite strongly with a character. Then it took a swan dive, and then they got it back a little bit. More. My big problem with a lot of these characters, more humility needs to be written into them. More they make them humble and also able to accept help. This is the other thing. Yes, Tony Stark was an arrogant clown in the original, well, not the original, but the first of the Robert Downey Jr. films.
Right.
He was an arrogant fool, and to a certain degree, he remained arrogant all through the franchise. Right. But he was also able and willing to accept help when necessary. He would he'd never have made it out of the caves, for example, without the Jensen, I think the guy's name was. Without that character.
Right.
Literally and figuratively, he would not have made it out of, those caves. He wouldn't have been able to carry on if it wasn't for that character. Yes, the Jensen character maybe had ulterior motives. Well, he did have ulterior motives. He was on a, suicide mission at the end of the day. But even when we're not talking about superheroes and we're talking about say, Lethal Weapon and Die Hard, for example, two franchises I really like.
Mhm.
The heroic male characters have a backstory to them. In Martin Riggs in the original Lethal Weapon film is a broken Vietnam veteran who's grieving the loss of his first wife and is right on the ragged edge. I mean, there's that one line or that one scene in the film, the first film, where he and Murtaugh are in the abandoned shop
Mhm.
after there's just been some kind of altercation or what have you.
He sticks Murtaugh's gun in his mouth and says, "Let's go." Yeah.
No, he's
Oh,
it was what do you want to hear? Sometimes I think about eating
oh,
a bullet,
oh, yeah.
and he says,
Yeah.
yeah, I do. But
Yeah.
the thing that keeps me going is coming back and doing my job. Now, cliche maybe, whatever. But come the end of the film, the first one, there's a bond of brotherhood, a bond of friendship, and to a certain degree, Riggs has had his redemption when he,
Right.
beats the ever loving hell out of the bad guy on the lawn.
Right.
Eventually, they end up shooting him to death. But after that, and not killing the guy and not killing himself, there's that moment where he collapses from exhaustion and Murtaugh sort of embraces him.
Yeah.
And you think, well, that's Riggs's redemption.
Right.
He's not
And
he's not going to kill himself.
right. And by that, he's solidly just a hero. While we were talking, I was thinking back in the 70s, there was the anti-hero westerns, mostly with Clint Eastwood, films like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Fistful of Dollars. And then later on, as opposed to spaghetti westerns, there were Hollywood westerns like The Unforgiven, and much later on, an urban kind of, I guess maybe, western themed uh, movie called Gran Torino.
I know.
Yeah, where Clint Eastwood throughout these, he plays an anti-hero, right? He plays uh the part of someone happen happening to be doing good, but with really very dubious morals, you know. And he doesn't, there is no redemption scene in any of them. Like Pale Rider, he was the hero of the down on their luck prospectors being pressured by the big shot uh industrialists to give up their claims and get out of town. But the fact of the matter is, in Pale Rider, the idea is, he's a ghost, right? He's a phantom. He was killed previously, by this same industrialist, and came back to life to enact revenge on them, uh, in favor of the down on their luck prospector. But again, he made no bond with those people, and he didn't become part of the community. Certainly not in Pale Rider. He was a ghost. He's a dead guy. But even in the others, he never found a place, right? In the spaghetti westerns, and then later on in Unforgiven, he didn't belong anywhere, right? And like in Unforgiven, he tried to change his life from being, a gun for hire to just being a pig farmer, but it ended up costing him, his wife, and ultimately, had to go back to being a gun for hire for a bunch of prostitutes that were same thing. They were, under the thumb of an evil sheriff. You see what I mean? In other words, regardless of how bad what he's up against is, he's still not beloved. He's not he doesn't become the hero welcome back into the village, like of course the uh saga of Gilgamesh, or another one called Young Roland to the Dark Tower came. um there are stories like that, but I don't want to be any of those people. they they don't inspire me. And it's like, I accept that they're good stories and they're well put together, but these are like damned souls, right? They're not going to be okay just because they did a bunch of good things, right? And I'm like, if they're trying to make these female superheroes like that, right? I think that's what makes them so unappealing, because if there is an inborn bias in favor of women, it's offensive to that. you know if a superhero or a hero who's a woman is doing good things, we just kind of naturally want them to have a place in the world, and to be loved and to be cared about, and to be, you know, part of the community, even if they have a really dark past. The thing about the anti-heroes of the Clint Eastwood ilk is that, frankly, they either ride off into the sunset all by themselves, or they die, or they're already dead. Again, those are not heroic stories. you know, they're more like intrigue type stories, and stuff like, which those are stories too, but it ain't a hero. And Captain Marvel is not a hero. It's they could do a lot more with Black Widow to make her a hero. But those other women, Dead Duck, that you mentioned, Ellen Ripley, and I'm sorry, the female lead from Terminator, and the characters in Lethal Weapon and Die Hard, they're loved. They're cared about, right? The least of them, or the least welcome, or the least community centered of them would be Ellen Ripley, but that was just because of the circumstances of the job. There's not very much community out in space, right? But she was never like standoffish and difficult to get along with just regular people.
Mhm.
And she was comfortable, like Ellen Ripley was comfortable with the crew, except for the ones that were being obnoxious, right? But the other ones she was fine with. And it's like, if you want a hero, that's what you want.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
in ordinary circumstance, you want them to be able to function with other adults.
If I can give a good modern example of this,
Sure.
real quick, I think the thing you're explaining about being able to work with other people, with other adults, the storyline, I think the only modern female hero I can think of, and this is where I warn for spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the second Wakanda movie that hasn't come out. If you haven't, stop here, go watch it, because it's gonna be a spoiler. But Shuri, who is the princess of Wakanda, in the first movie that we had of Black Panther, she was sort of standoffish at first, and she was just a really intelligent sister. And you did see some human aspects to her, like her and T'Challa would make fun of each other, and she was very caring, and she had jokes and stuff, but she was still sort of dehumanized because they were so focused on, well, she's a woman who's intelligent. But the second movie that they've now come out with, this new Black Panther movie, she is so much more humanized, and she has so much more lessons to it, and there's so much more seeing like her growth. She's a person is the best way I can really put it. she's still super smart, but you know, the main focus of it, because we start out the movie, and this is spoiler, and I'm sorry to you too if you haven't watched this or if you care to watch it. But we start out with it starts out with the death of her brother, and we see her go through the stages of grief throughout the whole movie. We see her trying to ignore her grief. You know, we see the moment and the instant shock she has. And then on top of that, you know, we see how this affects the relationship between her and her mother. And, you know, her mom's still treating her like a kid, and she has to act like an adult and kids with different people. And they suddenly meet this new civilization. And so we really see her learn how to talk and get along with this new group of people that live under the sea. Because she goes to their place and she talks with the king. She sits down, talks with him normally and civilly. She gets to understand the people, you know. And then when we see her mother died, she does get the Black Panther powers, and they do focus on and usually they focus a little bit on the strength, but they really didn't so much, surprisingly, in this movie, as much as they focused on the relationship, also showing her relationship with a male figure. Her I believe it's her uncle, but one of the leaders of the other tribes, because there's multiple tribes of Wakanda, who's sort of like an uncle to her. He was like giving her advice and stuff. And we really see her connection with a male character, her relationship with him.
Yeah,
And we see how
a
much she
fellow
relies on
adult.
them. Yeah.
That's the key, it's a
She
fellow
talks with a
adult.
fellow adult, talks with you know, family members, kid adult. We finally see a female character who actually works with people and communicates and is diplomatic
She
and
also,
someone who seems human. She genuinely goes through stages of grief and
yeah,
leadership, and she takes that and she finally learns
she
how to
had
be
to be,
fair and lead.
she had to be broken first,
Hmm.
and that's. I wish it wasn't so, but it's a key arc in all Hollywood hero stories. The hero has to be broken first before you can do anything with them. Otherwise,
Right.
there's nothing to them. There's no reason for them to do anything.
Yeah.
They might as well just shut up shop and, go off and do whatever, live a very privileged life or whatever their background is.
Right.
But in order for them to become the hero, they have to, in some way, shape, or form, be broken by something. In her case, it was the loss of her brother
And her mother.
or her mother. Well, brother and her mother wasn't. It was a, two-stage thing.
Yeah.
So, and it's, the other thing I wish Hollywood would learn is write the difference between writing these characters as independent women and writing them as self-reliant, because it all comes down to their attitude. A self-reliant woman is going to, or a self-reliant female character is going to garner that sympathy element when things aren't going her way. Yes, she can do things for herself and what have you, but she's not afraid to put her hands up and say, I can't do this. I need some help. I cannot do this alone. Even Wonder Woman needed an army behind her
Right.
to do the
And
things that she did.
that's what made, that's the kind of thing that, still makes them appealing as heroes, right? Is that, and Black Panther himself was, an example of being able to gather an army several times, in all of the Avengers and Black Panther story arcs, was, he was ready and willing to admit that he wasn't going to be able to fight the fight alone, right? And that, his people were willing to, go to battle with him, not just because he was, Prince and then King T'Challa, but because, he's good guy, and didn't mistreat people just because they were somehow less adept and less powerful than him. I think about, again, going back to Captain Marvel. I hate to do it, but it's just such a good example. The deleted scene where she's outside of the, I don't remember what it was, the storefront, and this guy on a motorcycle comes up and is rude and forward with her. total stranger, never saw him before, never going to see him again. And, instead of like being big enough to just like shake head, turn and walk away, she has a tantrum, and breaks the guy's arm and steals his clothes and his motorcycle. All I want to do, or all I would ask of the writers and her, because she seemed to really like that scene, is ask, okay, what about that is heroic? What about that is appealing, and to whom? And how does that make that same character, worthy of being, like I say, welcomed into the community that she's supposed to be standing for. I mean, that is what we are looking for from the villain, not the hero. Get it right. I mean, these things happen in these stories, but the point is, you want to make sure it's the bad guy doing them. Because if you get that mixed up, then, like I said, that even for somebody that really loves hero stories, that's extremely off-putting, right? And it interferes with all of the rest of the story. So.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I don't
another,
know what to say.
go on.
I didn't like Captain Marvel in the first place, and now I'm like, I don't know, I guess it's slightly because they're coming out with Mrs. Marvel. And Captain Marvel, I'm sorry, from my point of view, was just sort of a female tyrant. And there was really no maturity, which is why I couldn't stand when they got to like Endgame
Yeah.
or like the final really big Marvel movies where they had all the characters that they try to show her off as this mature, cool outer space chick. I'm like, no, no.
Yeah.
No, she never was. And now they're coming out with Mrs. Marvel. Mrs. Marvel is supposed to be based off this comic, of course, called Mrs. Marvel, and it's about a girl. And my problem is that, first of all, I think the name's too close to Captain Marvel because it's still Marvel. And just secondly, first of all, they've already admitted that they're doing so much not based off the comic. So there's supposed to be Pakistani representation, Muslim representation, Indian representation. Pakistani Muslim they apparently suddenly have taken out, and a lot of other things. And then on top of that, I don't know what she's actually supposed to do because my understanding of the comics is she just finds superpowers but then flies around to political rallies.
Yeah, like I said, I've never written fiction and I don't intend to, but I understand enough to know that you've got a pretty wide platform, to make heroic characters if you're going to write a story where they're imbued with superpowers or they're going to be able to do things that are really extraordinary, right? But the thing is, if you do that and just make them look like a currently bad actor, even in small ways, then it's going to be that much harder for me. Like I said, forget about being inspired. It's just, feeling like I'm not wasting my time and money watching, right? The character in, by the way, I haven't seen the second Black Panther movie, the one you were talking about. But
Sorry.
I mean, oh no, don't worry. I love getting spoilers. But I started reading comics with Black Panther and Prince Namor and all those back in the 70s, right? And I mean, please excuse me, but that means I have a certain expectation for the stories, right? I mean, it's like I want for my heroes to be heroic and still be able to function with other adults, and when they can't, when they can't, then as far as I'm concerned, that should be part of the backstory, Dead Duck, like you were saying, that eventually runs them into the wall so that they have their own, their own inventory to take and their own, moral compass to find so that they can be a hero, because those like I say, those Clint Eastwood characters, you wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't examine their moral compass because it seems like they don't have one, right? You know, again, they happen to be doing, you know, good things for people who need something good done for them. But it's clear, and it's clear with Captain Marvel, and it's clear with well, several of the others, that, you know, that they don't care either, right? You know, they just happen to be doing a good thing because it's Thursday, you know, or what, in other words, I can't pin any of their good act to anything about them, right? And it's like, if you're going to write a story like that, give me something to hang this on. You know, this superhero is doing this superheroic thing because of X, Y, and Z, you know, because, you know, like with Peter Parker in his own past, you know, he ran into a moral wall because his, you know, his immaturity and resentment and, you know, fear caused him to stand by while, you know, his aunt and uncle were murdered, right? Or his uncle was murdered, you know, and it's like, now I know why he's doing what he's doing, you know, he don't have to explain it, right? You know, but like I say, with these other people, they're just like out of the blue, sort of, you know, handed these superpowers, and they do some good things with them, and then they act crappy. You know, it's like, well, you know, you're the kind of person that might do a good thing, might not. You know, it's just that's something, but it's not heroic.
Yeah.
You know?
With the Peter Parker thing, it's the redemption arc, isn't it?
Mhm.
He's now doing the things he's doing to redeem the things he didn't do when
Right,
he should have done them.
right,
And I'm yes, another type of film I really enjoy is sort of the historical drama sort of stuff. So Gladiator being a prime example.
right.
And the female lead in that one, I forget her name. She was in a relationship with a drummer from Metallica,
Yeah,
the actress.
yeah,
But that's virtually the entirety of that film, apart from a handful of scenes, she comes across as being put upon by this violent psychopath of a brother
yeah,
who murdered his way onto the throne and what have you. And, you know, but she's working behind the scenes to try and protect the protagonist in the film, who the storyline wants you to have, wants us to believe is the ultimate hero. But she in herself is heroic, and she commands respect with the way in which she treats others.
right.
And her ultimate redemption is also the end of the film. Not only is it the protagonist, vice versa, the protagonist really gets redemption because he dies at the end of the film. I don't think
Right.
that's a spoiler. I don't think that's a spoiler 23 years down the road.
No.
Um, but she gets a form of redemption because she's been able to protect those around her
Right.
that she needs to protect. And she's done it for the right reasons because she knows that her brother is a racist psychopath
Mhm.
and she needs to protect people from him.
Right.
And the other great, I suppose, female character from historical literature, historical drama, would be Guinevere.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't, the Arthurian myth.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you've seen the film with Clive Owen and Keira Knightley in it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a woman who not to be messed with. She certainly knows how to use a bow and arrow, that Guinevere, as well as using her feminine wiles, but that's another story altogether.
Right. Well, and also using her brains. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, like her brains and, like I said, a solid moral framework where what she's doing, I mean, yes, at points, you know, it is protective of herself, just like the Empress in Gladiator, but you know, it was understood that it would it was being done, you know, for the greater good.
Mm.
And that, you know, I was like I say, you know, she ended up being the Empress of Rome, which, I mean, that sounds all great and everything on the surface, but her psychopathic brother who murdered his way onto the imperial throne just got stabbed in the throat and is dead. So now, tag she's it, right?
Yep.
And like, Maximus wasn't going to be any help because he just died too.
Yep.
So in the grand scheme of things, she did a very heroic thing, making it possible for Maximus to, to like kill her brother. Because it was either that or, like years and years under the thumb of Commodus. That would be bad, but it wouldn't just be bad for her, it'd be bad for everybody.
Yep.
And she could play the role and probably have had a pretty good life as the sister of the emperor, but she couldn't let that stand because it would be wrong.
Well, it was also incestuous in the storyline and everything else. So
yeah, geez,
we can't really let that one slide by. I mean,
yeesh.
Yeah, exactly. She had to do something. And Guinevere is probably one of the great characters of old British literature, old British storytelling. We don't know 100% if she was a real person. We don't know if Arthur was real.
Right.
They believe they found evidence of his existence. They now believe he was a Romano-British soldier who decided to take a stand.
But again, in order to make it a hero story, they had to hang a lot on that, and also, either create or, really embellish the person of Guinevere. And like I said, nothing wrong with that. It's fiction. It's kind of like all bets are off, and that's okay. But you can still screw it up.
Yeah, but also Guinevere in the film was a fantastic character.
Yeah,
she was doubtful while being fearless. When Arthur turned up on that small estate on Hadrian's Wall, or north of Hadrian's Wall, and freed her and the little boy and what have you, she had no reason to trust him. She was a Pict, as she was portrayed, and he killed tens and hundreds of Picts. Why would you trust this man?
No, he was, he was the enemy. But she had enough at least unconscious insight to understand that this is a man that is at least trying to do the right thing, and is worthy of not running away from. Again, and all of this stuff, even the well-told stories like that, that are heroic, and Guinevere was an heroic character in all of that. Not least because, again, she used her brains, but like I said, Maximus died, and Iron Man died. And like Thor, like wandered in and out of bumhood, right? It's like the pattern here is that it really don't matter, how heroic your good deeds are. They never complete the story by saying basically that, not to be cliche, but here is how they lived happily ever after. Not just that they lived happily ever after, but here's how this is, this is why, not only were they worthy of doing good deeds and heroically, but they were worthy of becoming regular people again,
Yep.
and being like accorded, respect and compassion and kindness and understanding and all that stuff. It's like the hero after the heroic act, at least in Hollywood, and frankly, even too often in literature, it just caricatures the ordinary people and makes us buffoons, who aren't capable of just treating a hero like a regular person, right? And that we have to pedestalize them to the point that it's awkward and uncomfortable and absurd for everybody, right? And it's like that also is not inspiring, and that's supposed to be the best you can hope for if you're a hero, right? And it's like it's either that or you die. It's like, well, that's not so great either.
No. No, I put out a TikTok a few weeks back. It was more aimed at sort of real life heroics. But the best thing you can do for a hero is let them go quietly into the night and never mention them again.
Like I say, I'd go one better than that, because you could let them go quietly into the night. I mean, like, Batman, and not be conscious of them, or like I said, you could just begin treating them like a regular person.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I guess what I mean is it can be done. It doesn't have to be this like god awful, awkward, goofy interaction between a fan of the hero and the hero. You can just be a regular person, right? And you don't have to be their like they're like Batman's Robin, or like the sidekick or anything. You just be a regular person. But if you can't grant the hero normalcy, right, and regular old humanity after they really did a good thing, maybe they're better off dead.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, I think another issue too, though, is like you don't see them normally, and it's hard to give that normalcy based on the actions. You were talking about the redemption arc. I think there's something else we have to account for, which is the responsibility arc. One of the hard things with Marvel is they're never really responsible for all the damage you see in the streets or anything. There's this, oh, we're supposed to protect the Earth. How are you protecting the Earth if the aliens are fighting you in New York? There's no like sense of responsibility really put on there. There's a sense of mission, there's a sense of redemption, but not a responsibility. And everyone in real life has a responsibility. And I think going back to Spidey, we're using Spidey a lot today.
No.
Going back to Spidey, not only did he have redemption, but he had responsibility. He had the responsibility in the Tobey Maguire and I can't think of his name right now, but the second Spider-Man, Andrew something or another like that.
Oh yeah.
You saw in their movies the responsibility of taking care of Aunt May, who was usually older,
right,
or having to go work, or responsibilities to a science club, or to actually furthering their career, whatever it was. And then you also had the redemption arc, but the responsibility was still there. Some of these other heroes don't really have that.
No,
and then there's a few heroes are actually surprisingly just responsible. I don't know if this would count as a hero, but for anyone who's a fan of the whole thing with The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, Galadriel, who is like the Lady of the Woods, the sort of like queen of the elves, one of the greatest elves, she's not seen much and she's not spoken about too much, but she's one of the three elves who received the rings of power. And you see it very little in the movie, but if you notice it enough, she really is responsible with the power and how she uses it. She, time and time again, just shows grace and responsibility. it goes unnoticed because everyone's focusing, on everything else in Lord of the Rings, obviously. The
Yeah,
elf knives and the dwarves and everything else, and bows, arrows, trolls, magic dragons.
right. But as you say, in the midst of all of that, individual and personal responsibility plays this big part, not only so that, and like Galadriel has the wherewithal, to help save Middle Earth, but also so that, like she is worthy of saving it and it ends up being worth saving. Right?
Yeah.
And so like I say, the moral conundrum for the hero is that, I save these people and I do this good thing and I bring my, indomitable powers to bear against the bad guy. And,
And she doesn't
now
rely
I
on her
have
power that much either, real quick, just to know. She actually did not use her ring of power that she was given until she got the news that the one ring went missing.
right.
Because she knew
Right.
responsibly that those things were very hard and manipulative to use.
Dangerous.
Dangerous to use, yeah.
Yeah.
And other heroes just go straight immediately to their powers.
Right.
And that's probably the ultimate heroic act, isn't it? Showing restraint of that nature. The old expression of when with great power comes great responsibility.
Again, you would think, that should be part of it. It should be part of the redemption. Is the acquisition of responsibility and maturity and humanity. People like to think if they were given superpowers that they would also have the wherewithal to exercise restraint, and it's like, not necessarily, not necessarily. But again, the ability to do that and the opportunity to exercise the restraint. Galadriel was, the queen of the wood elves, and so she was given plenty of room, to do the right thing, right? With some of the heroes that they're writing today, that it's like they're given superpowers to do good things for beings that are not even necessarily, worth saving, frankly, and up against villains or evil forces, that a lot of the time, there's a reason why they turned evil, right? And the point being that if the source of that evil isn't addressed, and if it isn't shown to be evil by a corresponding good and maturity by the hero, it'll just happen again. It'll just become another story to tell until it's tapped out. But again, I if I'm going to pay the money and if I'm going to take the time and if I'm going to, invest my interest in a hero story, they have to be able to do better than that. And again, I hate to say it, but the hero story I'm still looking for is the one where after it's all over with, they're just another member of the community that, that isn't forgotten and, isn't moving through the community with an a secret identity, that they're known to be who they are and they're still treated like people.
I'm sure it exists in real life, but
Not in the world of the screen.
no,
Not
you
that
won't
I
see
can
it.
think of.
That would be too boring. Let's
I suppose.
I'm pretty certain that many of the real life, particularly sort of military heroes, have been able to go about their business quietly with only the people around them locally knowing who they are and their history.
I would enjoy that story.
But it wouldn't equate to anything on the screen. I mean, could you imagine telling the story of a Victoria Cross winner.
Mhm.
So let's take Robert Kane for an example. Lands in the middle in a field 8.5 miles away from his objective, gets to his objective, his company gets absolutely slaughtered, gets forced to retreat, gets sent to another objective. What remains of his company gets absolutely slaughtered again, falls back to a position, and then has a psychotic episode, which is essentially what happened to him.
Right.
If you actually go through his story, and for 3 or more days, he was in the grip of a psychotic episode, essentially.
Yep.
Which ended with him firing I think a 3-inch mortar horizontally at enemy troops. Complete and utter madman. Not someone that you'd want to make angry. No, you wouldn't want to make him angry, that's for sure. But the thing, I'm supposing people who he wanted to know knew who he was afterwards when he went back to what was his pre-war job. But then his daughter didn't know who he was.
Right.
All his daughter knew was he was daddy.
Right.
It wasn't until after he died that she realised he had the Victoria Cross.
Right.
So I don't think even then see that people know who these people are
Yeah.
and I just allow them to go about their business. I don't know.
Again, it becomes like a secret identity.
Yeah.
And I said, if that's the cost of heroism, then, the people for whom he was a hero, again, I hate to be harsh, but they've kind of failed him, Yeah,
But
I
then,
mean, he when he did what he did, it was really extraordinary, and it was, like you said, a little psycho, but it was what had to be done, right? And it's like that to me, that's the proper response to the hero, right? Is that, we're only grateful because you had the ability and willingness to do what needed to be done, and you did it. And now that you have done it, and the ticker tape parades or, Victoria Crosses, whatever is over, we're glad you're back and we're glad you didn't die. Because that's the thing that for, heroes in real life and a lot of heroes in literature and media is that, you just want to ask the people in the community, if who this person is and what they did. Are you glad they're here or what? Right? So it's like, because if you're not glad they're here, then what the hell good are you? Right.
Which this also comes back to the point we made in the original episode we did on this, Taz. But we said people's actions need to be heroic. We don't need to be heroes.
Right. Yeah. It's an event, or some series of events.
Yeah.
That the right person, that the right person enacted with the right tools and the right talent and the right willingness, and like I say, that one man's opinion, but the reward ought to be that, that they're appreciated at least as much, for who they are morally from then on, as what they did in those moments in the past. Because if you can't do that, what exactly is it that he's being a hero for?
Yeah.
Him or herself?
Yeah.
I mean, it's still the people who have, been saved by the hero, and again, going back to Tall Lady's responsibility arc, their responsibility is to continue being worthy of that salvation. They and this is not rocket surgery. I mean, it's not, nobody's asking them to climb mountains. It's just a matter of, being able and willing to treat that person like a good person that they're glad to be around. And they have to be a hero. I still think pedestalizing a hero in real life, especially, is never a good idea, right? Because it isolates them and puts them, I mean, yeah, above, but away from the people that they did the right thing for. It ain't right.
There's a fine line, isn't there, between acknowledging the person's heroism or heroic acts and pedestalizing them, putting them up there for the,
Yeah.
look at this, look at this person, everybody, they did this thing.
Yeah.
And
being worthy of being saved is a matter of being able to see that line and say, on this side of the line is gratitude and appreciation and a welcome back. On the other side of the line is pedestalizing or resenting, or villainizing the same person.
It's sort of similar to like what we say in different Christian and Catholic communities, we do religious history, they bring up the big difference between idolization and, just faith.
Right.
Idolization, you have all these figures, you got like a printed like cross and stuff. It's like it's such a big deal. They're so greater than, but then faith is just acknowledging they're at the same level as you, the being you believe in, and
right.
And just hoping and praying, knowing that they're not all seeing, but they are. But it's like in a sense where they're at the same level as you versus you have 1,000,001 pictures of Jesus and you're asking why do you make you do this life choice instead of recognizing, no, you made that life choice. They're just there to hold your
hand. Yeah. I told somebody once that, there are things that I revere, right? Interactions and people that, the interactions I have with them, I'm reverent of, and some of them I even hold sacred. I said, really, the only reason for that is because those interactions, they're only different because they only serve that one purpose, right? They can't be used for anything else, and because of that, I place those not so extraordinary and not so beautiful interactions with the same people. I hold those interactions in just as much regard, right? Mostly because they're more versatile, and they're more sustainable. The kinds of interactions that, in my life have really been, lack of a better word, magical, they don't happen every week.